Looks like we just woke the dead. Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the only podcast in the world looking at the strange way helicopters keep blowing up in film. In 2013, World War Z was one of the most talked about movies of the year. Based on a best-selling novel, it had Brad Pitt as its star, an ambitious world-spanning plot, and a respected dramatic director at its helm. Unfortunately, World War Z was mostly being talked about for its tales of production woe. Its script had been endlessly rewritten, its ending expensively reshot, and its release worryingly delayed. So when the film finally lurched into theatres, the big question was whether World War Z had been saved from a grisly cinematic death. So given that we're talking about a film full of the brain dead who are only capable of moaning incoherently, my guest today couldn't be more appropriate. With me once again is my good friend Dara. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, brains!
I thought that might be what you came back at me with. I'm glad you're so predictable.
Brains! Brains!
I hope your contributions pick up from here.
That's about as good, deep as it's going to get today, Will.
Fair enough. But as we're tackling sort of World War Z, and that's a zombie movie, it kind of brought a question into my mind, which is, how prepared do you think you would be for a zombie apocalypse?
That's a very good question, which you've sprung on me, Will. I like these surprise questions. I like to keep a full larder at home, so don't never really get down to the bare essentials. If I see I'm running out of a few things, then on my Tesco order, I'll make sure I might order a couple extra tins of butter beans. So if tomorrow there was a bulletin in the morning saying that unfortunately normal life's ended and zombies were out in the streets, I would have a pretty good stock of food to last me, a good while. And I like to think, I'm a resourceful kind of guy. I would maybe fashion some barrels for rainwater and things like that. So I felt I'd quite like. I fancy my chances in a post-zombie apocalypse.
I mean, do you think you could easily fortify your home?
Well, I've got one entrance, one front entrance, one back entrance. Narrow hallway. I've seen The Walking Dead. I could just put spikes in the hallway, so if they come in, they just go straight on the spikes and kill themselves. So yeah, I think I feel confident.
And so, in the event of a sort of zombie apocalypse, it's likely that civilization is going to break down. And, often in these types of movies where you see that sort of situation play out, you see people fall into one of two camps. They're either this, caring, sharing group of people who want to, replicate and reproduce civilization as it was, or they become kind of like a rampaging feral horde. Which kind of camp do you think you would fall into?
Oh, that's a very good question, Will. This is something I often, in my kind of quiet moments, I think about, and I know for a fact, if there was some sort of nuclear war and some, or some terrible plague affecting everyone, people would go absolute bananas. They'd be chopping up their grandma for dinner. The worst aspects of humankind would come out. There'd just be absolute chaos. So if I was honest, I would be looking out for number one, but my number one would include my friends and family. So it would be, I would create my own heavily fortified commune. A bit like Mad Max, perhaps.
Your friends and family would be safe until such time as they became like a commodity that could be bargained quite handily for.
If they had, extra layers of fat or something and they were worth 2 barrels of oil, then,
they might have to go.
They might have to go. There's Mum, sorry, love, you've been good so far, but baby's got to eat.
Okay, well, I think it's time we took a human flesh frenzied bite out of World War Z. Cue the dramatic strings.
It's the same worldwide. Is anyone doing better than we are?
We've lost the East Coast. Moscow's still dark. Life as we know it will come to an end in 90 days. It's on us to change that.
I can't leave my family.
Don't pretend your family is exempt. When we talk about the end of humanity.
Okay, World War Z. Brad Pitt plays a former United Nations investigator who is called back into service when the world is plagued by a mysterious infection which has turned the human population into rampaging, mindless zombies. He's charged with finding the source of the outbreak, which scientists believe will help them find a cure. Pitt's search takes him from the United States to North Korea, Israel, and then, most bizarrely, Wales. The cast is obviously headed by Brad Pitt, but in supporting roles we have a surprising number of television actors. So we've got that bloke out of Lost, a dude from Scorpion, and a guy from Treme. Apparently they spent $190 million on this film. Clearly none of it was spent on the cast. World War Z was directed by Mark Forster, who made the critically acclaimed Monsters Ball and Finding Neverland, and the critically derided Quantum of Solace. World War Z got pretty lukewarm reviews when it came out. The Daily Telegraph said it was a collection of moderately violent action set pieces, untroubled by humour or coherence, while Time Out said that the film was less a horror flick than a thinking man's action thriller, dubbing it the Newsnight of zombie films. As is often the case, Joe Public seems to like the film rather better. On IMDb, the film has a rating of 7, while Letterboxd users have the film averaging 3 out of 5 stars. So, Dara, what do you make of World War Z?
Yeah, I like that description, the Newsnight of zombie films. I had it down as the Bourne Identity of zombie films. So it's kind of a bit more, there's a lot of jumping from place to place. It's got that real world quality, I like a film. For something like this, a potential reality, there's obviously there's no thing as zombies, but I think zombies are so entrenched in the common psyche, we could see, we get viruses and flu pandemics and things. It kind of ties into that. I like the way that this film starts off with kind of real footage with real news anchors reporting on real stories which they've used. And I was really surprised. I was thinking, this is going to be another kind of action-y thing with a big, blockbustery Brad Pitt in the role that, he's doing the usual sort of stuff. I thought I was going to not like this very much. But I actually really enjoyed this film. And I think we're going to talk about it later. There's quite a lot of action in this film. And they could have gone the whole hog and made this a sort of Rambo versus the zombies. But they brought it back. They toned it down at the end. We're going to talk about the change rewrites that this film has had. And they made it quite tense and sort of sparse ending to the film, which I thought worked really well. And I actually really enjoyed this film.
Well, sadly, it seems that you enjoyed the film quite a bit more than I did. I think this film actually contains its own metaphor for what I made of it. So we learn at one point that North Korea has actually sort of survived the zombie apocalypse quite well because the country have pulled out the teeth from all 23 million of its citizens, and that seemed rather apt to me because I think this is a rather toothless zombie movie for my own money. It's not to say I don't think it's got some good qualities. I kind of enjoyed the large global scale of the plot, and it was interesting to actually see a zombie movie where you see the whole world like caught up in the plague or the virus. That's not something you often see in zombie movies. There's a few others that have done that. I thought there's some really good individual scenes in this film, but I did think that it was rather hamstrung by a stodgy story and also hamstrung by its PG-13 rating, which I think in a zombie movie, I think you need to be able to show certain levels of violence, and I think the desire to keep the rating down to PG-13 I think really sort of harmed some of this film.
Well, that's an interesting one because I did notice that, and obviously it's unusual for a zombie film to be a PG-13. I think Brad Pitt originally wanted to go hard. He wanted to have an R-rated type film. There was a lot of footage shot, I believe, that was quite graphic and quite gory. And obviously, if you want to make if this is a big and this is the problem I think a lot of filmmakers have, is that they're dictated to by the studios who want to make as much money as possible. And by making a film an R, you're cutting off vast selection of moviegoers from actually watching the film and paying their money. So they cut a lot of the gore and stuff out of this film. Personally, I thought it still worked pretty well. Part of the art of filmmaking, I guess, is leaving the gaps for the viewers to use their own imagination, which I thought they did well in certain places. Yeah, it's certainly no George A. Romero type guts blowing out. If that's your bag, Will, then I can understand you being disappointed.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing a slight disservice to the Romero zombie movies because whilst they do obviously have that explicit level of gore, the stories within them are often very intelligent and they're often allegories for social issues. So he's dealt with like racism, he's dealt with, consumerism and stuff in his movies. So his movies aren't just about blood and guts.
I agree with you, but they obviously are the kind of benchmark for zombie films, and a zombie film as we know it have a lot of gore and it's a lot of pulling your hand in guts and eating, brains and all that kind of stereotypical zombie stuff, which, I don't get me wrong, I like that as much as the next man.
But you said that you liked the story here, but I had some sort of problems with the story here, and we see Brad Pitt, he's this UN investigator, and we're introduced to him at the beginning of the film alongside his family. So he's got his wife and his 2 children, and they're pretty much in the film for the first act, and then they're parked and sort of disappear completely out of proceedings right up until the end of the movie. And it just feels as if the film didn't really kind of introduces them as characters and then like, you know what? We don't need them anymore. We're just going to park them over here. And
I think the reason for that is they want to kind of establish his family man, nice guy credentials by the fact that he's looking after, he's playing with ruffling his son's hair. Then he meets some other, he likes children, not in that way. They want to kind of get him as the good guy. So I think having that. It's a plot line. It's a kind of a character line you see a lot in films. I think it's like to establish a character. Not great for the actress playing the wife because she doesn't get to do anything. But I think that's probably the reason.
Well, one of the things I did enjoy about this movie a lot was actually probably the first sort of 20 minutes of the movie. And I think you've already mentioned that you quite liked the beginning of the movie as well. The use of the montage of news reports. But I actually thought that the sequence in Philadelphia, I think it is, where we see Brad Pitt and his family inside a car, and you can see certain things start to happen. These police helicopters start buzzing overhead. Then you see these police motorcycles start sort of racing between gridlocked traffic. So you get this sense that something's happening, but you don't quite know what it is. I actually thought, I really enjoyed that section of the film because I thought it sort of got us into the action story very quickly, and it's actually sort of quite a tense and dramatic section of the film.
At the beginning, I was really surprised, completely agree. You get the sense of chaos. So everything's going about as normal. It's just a traffic jam that they're stuck in. And then suddenly what you expect to happen is like police to be really, nice and do the job and be respectful to people. They're going crazy. People just smashing through parked traffic to get away from whatever danger, which we don't know. And you'll look at, and everyone's got just wide-eyed kind of, they don't know what's going on. They kind of panic and chaos. You'd get exactly that kind of thing if suddenly there was like a marauding pack of zombies coming through the town centre. That was perfect. I thought that was fantastic.
But I was slightly less impressed with some of the stuff that happened after that sequence. So after that sort of street scene, we see Pitt and his family hole up in this block of flats, and they take refuge with this family of, I think they're Mexicans, I think they're meant to be.
Latinos,
Latinos. And then you see Pitt and his family have to sort of fight their way up to the roof in order to be helicoptered away to safety. And the kind of the action sequence where they're sort of going up this staircase, I mean, it was so dark, you could see almost nothing in that particular sequence. And I think they were perhaps trying to hide some of the violence with the use of light in order to keep the ratings down. I don't know. That sequence just started to highlight some of the problems that I had with this film.
Personally, I didn't have any trouble with it being too dark. I mean, it was at night, so you expect it to be a little bit dark. It seemed quite dramatic. It all worked for me. I didn't, right to the end where they had to, they're trying to get onto a helicopter that's trying to pick him up on the rooftop, and there's zombies chasing him up this fire escape steps. And as he's running towards the helicopter, you've got the allies just picking off zombies as they're like bullets whizzing past Brad Pitt to shoot zombies behind. And let's just say, if anyone's not seen the film, these zombies can run. They're not the kind of slow, lumbering zombies that we're used to. They can absolutely cane it. So they're your worst nightmare, really. I thought it worked really well. I don't know what your problem is, Will.
Well, after that particular section of the movie, the action then moves to South Korea and an American airbase, which is in the country and people believe is the potential source of the zombie outbreak. So Brad Pitt is dispatched out to this Air Force base. And I think it's there that a certain pattern in this film starts to really emerge here, which is that Brad Pitt seems to be something of a one-man disaster area. I mean, he's meant to be the hero, but seems to have one dark rain cloud of luck hanging over his head. I don't know if you picked up on the same thing, Dara.
Well, yeah, I think everyone he comes into contact with pretty much dies or has parts of their body chopped off or gets eaten. I suppose, to be fair to him, he is going into the danger zone to try and find the source of the virus in order to sort of isolate it. So he's not sitting as we would have done, in our fortified front room eating beans from a tin. He's trying to find a solution to this problem, Will. So, got to cut him some slack.
Yes, but certain bits do rather stretch credulity. So we meet this character who's meant to be the hero of this film. He's built up as this scientist who is the world's one hope of finding a cure to the virus. And as soon as they land in South Korea, they're attacked by zombies. And this scientist character, in order to, tries to run away and ends up shooting himself in the head.
Oh yeah, that was a bit ridiculous. And also, so then Brad Pitt is like the de facto now, in charge of scientific operation, and they obviously then have to try and escape there and get back on the plane. And he tips that these zombies are attracted by sound. And what does he do? He gets a phone call. It's like the typical thing in the cinema. They tell you to turn your your phone off to silent, before the film starts, not to bother anyone. He's got his phone going. His missus calls him as he's on his bike, riding in between these zombies. The phone goes off, and all hell breaks loose. He isn't the most capable kind of hero, and that's probably the reason that a lot of the people by his side end up dead.
Well, I mean, if I saw him coming towards me in this film, I'd be asking for a priest and trying to get my affairs in order, because I wouldn't be thinking I'd be too much longer for this earth.
He's not a Scientologist, is he, Brad Pitt? I'm not sure he'd accept that. Is he a Scientologist?
I don't think he is. I don't think so.
I hope he isn't, because that would be not accepted in any of his films, I don't think.
But I mean, it is quite incredible, the list of catastrophes that follow him around in this film, because, Philadelphia at the beginning of the film, we see that goes to hell within minutes of Brad Pitt's arrival. The poor Mexican family that he shelters with, they all get chewed up by zombies. The scientist shoots himself in the head. He also then manages to sabotage an entire country, because Israel is perfectly safe behind its walls that it's erected for itself until, obviously, Brad Pitt arrives.
Yeah, don't forget at the end when some of the zombies actually manage to jump on the plane and get on the plane, he just kind of goes, I'm not really interested about saving the lives of any of the other passengers. I've got my grenade and I'm going to blow a hole in the side of the plane and let it suck every single other person in the plane out whilst we're safe in the front with our seatbelts on. Yeah, he's not a man to hang around with. He keeps himself safe, and that's the only person he's worried about.
He rather sounds a man after your own heart.
I might invite him in. He might get special exemption into my new cult.
So let's dig into the depiction of violence in this movie, because we've already sort of touched on it at several points already. And this film was a PG-13, and I think they deliberately tried to keep the rating down in order to get as many bums on seats in the theatres. Now, for me, this was a real problem, because zombie movies, we all know, how do you kill a zombie? It's by shooting them in the head. Or by driving a stake through the head. So it seems to me inexplicable that if you're going to make a zombie movie, that you are going to saddle yourself with a rating which makes showing the method of killing a zombie almost impossible. And it just renders some parts of this film completely ridiculous. So you see these zombies, they're swarming over like living humans, and I guess it's meant to look like they're sort of eating their flesh, but because the film can't show you that, it just ends up looking like these zombies are sniffing these people like a frisky dog.
I mean, I do see what you're saying. I mean, I think they really did have discussions about how graphic they could make the film in order to get a rating. It was kind of almost like, the aim was to try and push it as much as they can to get this 12A, but nothing more. I do see what you're saying, and I think the film probably would have been better if you had one or two isolated, depictions of gore or the usual stuff you see. Kind of would have made it a little bit more kind of the zombies a little bit more scary. Obviously, they're quite scary by the fact that they're very mobile and they kind of dart about and they're kind of erratic when they get stimulated, like much more than a human. They seem to be able to jump and, they're even faster. They're more powerful than humans, which is a bit weird. I've not seen that before. Yeah, I think you probably have a point, Will, but money talks and they wanted to get bums on seats, so they couldn't do an R rating.
Well, one thing we definitely need to talk about on this episode is really the third act of this film, because World War Z, as I said in my introduction, it was one of the most sort of talked about films of the year, but mostly because of all of the issues that it had in its production. And very famously, this film was shot, edited, and basically the studio looked at it and decided this film cannot be released as it is, and they decided to reshoot the entire third act. So originally what you had in this film was the action was then going to move to Russia, and you had Brad Pitt inventing this device called a lobotomizer in order to kill the zombies, and we see Brad Pitt becoming the leader of the human resistance. Instead, what we have in this film is the action moving to a scientific laboratory in Wales, and this laboratory is supposed to have the answer to the particular crisis, and there's some zombies that have there's been a zombie outbreak within the laboratory itself, so there's lots of skulking around corridors and lots of creaking doors as well. Yeah, Dara, what did you make of this third act?
It's the third act that kind of makes the film for me. So I think the decision to do this and reshoot the third act was very wise. Obviously, I've not seen the original. I don't know whether there is any kind of... From what I gather, it was a big budget set piece set in Red Square, Brad Pitt turning into Rambo and lots of killings and stuff like that. And what they've done is they've looked at that and thought, this isn't supposed to be... It's from the source material is quite a well thought after and critically acclaimed book. So they've gone for a more character driven ending, a more character driven plot line all the way through. So you are seeing Brad Pitt at the end, just he's dealing with zombies, but the tension as he's trying to get through this laboratory to get these, they basically find a cure. What he thinks is a cure by injecting himself with viruses, because the zombies don't want to eat people who are basically not very tasty and about to die. So he's skulking around this laboratory, trying to make as little noise as possible in order to not provoke, because they've got no chance against these zombies otherwise. And I thought it was incredibly tense and worked really well in the kind of the scheme. You've had all the grand action at the beginning and in the middle, and then it kind of really pares it down. I suppose it's a bit like some of the endings in like Alien, for instance. And I thought it was really good and a wise decision. Obviously, they looked at the first cut of the film and thought this just isn't working. So they make a brave decision, and I think a correct decision.
Well, I really wasn't impressed by the ending at all. It just seemed a collection of tropes that you've seen in countless episodes of, I don't know, of something like Scooby-Doo, where somebody's creeping down a corridor and then kicks something entirely observable, and that's sure enough, that's what Brad Pitt does here. Just kicks this completely observable can of Coke, thus making a noise that attracts the zombies. And what does he do right at the end of the movie? The one weapon that he's got is a crowbar, and he puts it down and leaves it outside of the room that he then goes into. I mean, come on, you are presumably in this, you're in this environment where you could be killed at any moment. What is the one thing you're going to make sure you have in your hand at a time? It's the weapon, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's sure that what he's gone on to get, this virus, will solve his problem. So and he's right. He ends up injecting himself with the virus. The zombies don't want to eat him. He walks through, and I think it's quite a nice scene at the end. So you've got all the zombies that were attracted to the noise suddenly see Brad Pitt walk into him. They all run towards him and just completely ignore him because he's almost invisible to them, because his blood is coursing with this virus he's injected, and they don't want to eat him. I see where you're coming from, but would you really have wanted another big CGI-driven? You've just had 2 of those in the film. You want another one at the end as well?
Not necessarily. I just want it done better. It's really interesting what you said, though, because that moment, I know exactly the moment you're talking about, where Brad Pitt's walking down the corridor and all the zombies are running towards him, and that's clearly meant to be a big moment. Now, for me, it didn't land, but for you, it obviously completely landed.
Yeah, it did. I thought it was a very, very, because zombies have been, there's the whole thing about zombies coming towards you, and he's confident that he's found the cure, and he can walk serenely through these zombies and know they're not going to get him, and everyone's amazed because they can't believe he would have been devoured in 2 seconds. So yeah, I felt it actually worked quite well. It was quite powerful.
Fair enough. Now, World War Z 2 is apparently on the horizon. There have been, after things going very quiet with this movie, there have in the last sort of 18 months or so been sort of various rumours and news stories about a sequel finally firing up into production. Dara, would you be up for seeing a sequel to this movie?
I really would, and the reason at the moment I would like to see it is because attached to it is David Fincher, who's one of my favourite directors. I absolutely love Seven. I liked Alien 3. I know a lot of people, I don't know if you're a big fan of Alien 3. I kind of like he's good at claustrophobia. He's good at, the kind of, it's very stylistic, his films. He shoots them in a way, you can almost tell a David Fincher film.
There's always a very strong atmosphere in his movies.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd like to know what he could do with this. I mean, I don't know. I'm a fan of kind of more of the claustrophobia aspects of kind of horror and psychological horror. I think they work work better for me. So I think if he's going to do that kind of film, I don't know what plot he would do. I mean, I think we were talking before, the original source material, the book, it goes over a 10-year period, where this film is pretty much, the film we're talking about, the first World War Z, it kind of dispenses a lot of the material from the film and just almost like an independent story on its own. It would be interesting to maybe see what the zombie outbreak did 5 years after, or even 10 years after the outbreak, how the world has changed. I mean, to be honest, even though I enjoyed this film, compared to something like 28 Days Later, there's no comparison. That's a much better film in my... Did Danny Boyle do that one? He did, didn't he?
He did, yes.
Yeah, that for me is a much better film. It's much more realistic. But I'd like to see it go maybe in that kind of direction. But I don't know. What do you think? Are you done with this now, or would you like to see a sequel?
Well, if David Fincher is involved, then I would definitely be interested to see what he does with it, because I think he's a fantastic director, and as you said, he's wonderfully atmospheric and he's able to create tension very creatively. I don't know if you've seen the film that he did. The name is going out of my... I don't know if you've seen the film Zodiac. There is a sequence in that film where one of the policemen, I think it is, or the reporter, goes to the house of a suspect, and I think he goes down into the basement of the house, and nothing actually happens, but Fincher is just absolutely crafts that sequence so masterfully that it's incredibly tense, almost unbearably tense, and just doing that with a complete horror staple of somebody going down into a basement. So
I think I have. Is that the one about the serial killer?
Yeah,
I have seen that. Is a good film.
I think he's also a very intelligent filmmaker, and so I think that he would be able to find a way of taking the ideas in the source material in the novel and incorporating them in a way which tells a good story, but also, has those ideas. I think one of the things that intimidated or created problems with this World War Z, adapting it from the book, was that the book is so full of ideas that I think there was just too much there, and I don't think they ever quite got a handle on how to simplify the novel. And I think that if David Fincher's involved, I think there's a much more chance of success of finding a way to navigate the demands of a 2-hour film and a novel that has got some strong and intelligent ideas that it wants to put across.
I find it quite interesting to look at the sort of behind the scenes about filmmaking, and not just sort of skill of a director, but just sort of the money side, and what motivates certain directors to make certain decisions, writers to make certain decisions, actors to choose certain films. It seems to me these days, the bigger the budget you've got, the more constraints, you've got more people pulling at your creative vision. It's like this film, for instance, big budget, Brad Pitt attached to the film. They start looking at things like, how will this play in China? All these things that kind of dilute what the film's about, not making it an R-rated film, making it a 12A. It almost seems like the bigger the budget, you've got so many obstacles to you making a good film. When's the last intelligent, big budget film? I'd like people to, tweet us and tell us the last film that was over $250 million to make and was really intelligent, had something to say, looked at things in a different way, wasn't just explosions or people get shot or car chases. I don't think these films are able to be made. It's almost an impossibility.
Answers on a postcard, please.
Please.
Okay, I think it's that time in the podcast where we have to discuss the meaning of existence, or at least the meaning of our existence, which is the exploding helicopter. But before we do that, please listen to this important message.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
We're back and we're talking exploding helicopters. So this is the setup for the key scene. We're in Israel and everyone is safe inside the security walls that the country has built. Unfortunately, Brad turns up and the place quickly goes to hell. Having scaled the walls, CGI zombies are now running amok. Pitt is now on the run for his life. A military helicopter tries to rescue him, but is waved off when zombies swarm towards it. Unfortunately, it's not quick enough, and the undead meat munchers are able to clamber on. Weighed down, the whirlybird spins, then drops to the ground, where it explodes. Dara, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
Well, I quite enjoyed it. I suppose it's another way for the filmmakers to show that the world's sort of collapsing, and getting overrun. So, even a helicopter in the air is not safe because they seem to have jumped from the ramparts to actually get onto this helicopter's struts, and then they kind of hang off it like those monkeys you get with those plastic monkeys that kind of hang off each other, and they're dangling from the struts, and the weight of it brings the helicopter. Actually, some of the zombies sort of climb up each other like ants and then go into the cockpit, and obviously then you don't see the pilot get chomped or anything like that, but he's obviously a goner, and then it starts spiraling like a really horrible angle, and then it all just smashes into the ground, and I think quite nice shots of rotor blades sort of flying off, and I quite liked it. It looked quite real. We always like a nice rich inferno. Obviously it's CGI. This is CGI, there's no doubt about it, but looks very realistic. Nice explosion. You don't see any kind of suffering, which is a shame because we like to see suffering with our exploding helicopters. But you don't get that in a 12A. Well, there you go. That's another thing they've dilled you out of some human suffering here.
I like to watch human suffering, and I like to inflict human suffering. So, yeah.
By doing a podcast every other week, you're doing it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm taking my human suffering out to the entire planet. But like yourself, I enjoyed this exploding helicopter. I liked how the helicopter's making a despairing effort to take off quickly and get away. And then you just see a few of the zombies grabbing onto the landing struts, then a few more and more. And you can see the pilot is sort of losing control. And as you said, you can see them sort of clamber inside the helicopter, and you start using your own imagination as to what the scenes of carnage that must be
horror.
Yeah, the horror. Yeah, the carnage that must be taking place inside that cockpit. And you then see it crash into the ground on its side. Yeah, good explosion. I liked that particular scene. Because obviously, Brad Pitt up to that point was pinning his hopes on making a getaway on that helicopter. So, it was a good scene to, heighten the drama, cut off that route of escape and, force him to find a plan B.
Yeah, I guess if you're gonna have one of these in there, you either make the exploding helicopter completely ridiculous, you make it completely massive, or you actually make it part of the plot. Those are kind of the three key successes for any exploding helicopter directors out there.
We should point out to the one or two people who do listen to this podcast that there have actually been some other films with helicopters destroyed by zombies. So World War Z isn't unique in that particular aspect. So I don't know if you've seen any of the Resident Evil films, Dara, but
I know you're a big fan of Mila Djokovic or Jovovich. You've got an unhealthy obsession with her. I can't, for the life of me, imagine why, Will. And I have not seen those films. Please tell me about them.
I will tell you one thing about them is that she always shows nipple in the Resident Evil movies. And apparently she even upped the ante because I think she'd shown one nipple in one and she decided, you know what, I'm going to do both nipples in the next one. But
well, she's going to show 3 in the third one.
She's the Scaramanga. But the Resident Evil films, the first film doesn't feature an exploding helicopter, but all of the subsequent films, apart from the most recent one, the 6th film, the final chapter, all
6 films?
6 films.
Are these direct to video or something?
No, they're actually, you wouldn't believe, guess how much these films have grossed in their worldwide takings?
I don't know, some 300 million.
More than that. They have collectively, all the films, they've grossed well over $1 billion now.
Wow. Did these come out of the cinema then, these films?
Yeah. All of the film, you look at those films, all of them make money.
And why do they make 6 films? Because
they make money.
People make money and people want to see them, even though I'm sure they're toilet. Will, are we going to do a Resident Evil film at some point?
Would you like to do one, Dara?
What is the highest rating Resident Evil film on Rotten Tomatoes?
I thought you were going to ask me which one has the most nipples in, but
the third one.
I will look at which one has the highest rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and maybe we can schedule that in.
Maybe we do one for your birthday. Christmas is coming up, Will. How a nice little present. You can get to watch Mila Djokovic. three breasts.
Come on, we're not leaving this podcast until you get her name out.
I don't even know. I've never heard it pronounced. What's her name? How do you say
Jovovich.
Jovovich. Okay.
Well
Jovovich.
Done. You did it.
Go.
Excellent.
Okay, maybe tune in, guys. This could be your next treat.
Well, it's Christmas and my birthday coming up, so I think it's the perfect time for me to twist your arm into doing one of these movies.
Okay, well, it's a deal.
Okay, well, I think that just about wraps up our discussion of World War Z. Dara, thanks for joining me once again.
I'm off to the shed to stock up on tins.
Just a few things from me. Check out the website, explodinghelicopter.com. Leave us a review on iTunes, give us a retweet or shout out on Facebook. Help spread the word about what we do. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Why'd you sell guns to the North?
Why not?
Are they surviving this?
Indeed they are.
Using your guns?
Guns are half measures.
How then?
They took away Zeke's exponential power. They pulled the teeth of all 23 million in less than 24 hours. Greatest feat of social engineering in history. It's brilliant. No teeth, no bite, no great spread.